Hey guys, today I'll show you a vampire thriller TV series named First Kill. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. For centuries, tales of vampires and vampire hunters have been passed down through generations, eternal enemies locked in a cycle of bloodshed and vengeance. But in the 21st century, the younger generation dares to defy tradition, sparking a forbidden romance. When a deadly hunt turns into love at first sight, ancient customs clash with modern values. Can these star-crossed lovers overcome the boundaries of race and destiny to be together? The drama begins with a young vampire girl, Juliet, who is having a vivid wet dream about diabetic bloodlust. Though she looks like an ordinary teenager on the outside, her true nature is anything but. Driven by her vampiric instincts, Juliet harbors an intense craving for blood, and she's reached the age when vampires are expected to hunt their first human. But Juliet, with her kind heart, can't bring herself to make her first kill. To suppress her urges, she relies on medication, something her parents have noticed with growing concern. Juliet's parents hope she'll soon be able to stand on her own 2 feet. Her older sister, Eleanor, is their shining example, completely self-sufficient, skilled at hunting, and thriving in human society without a hitch. Besides her family, Juliet also has a childhood friend, Ben, who's been by her side since they were kids. They even dated briefly before realizing they were both gay. Despite their close bond, Ben has no idea Juliet is a vampire. So when she struggles with her bloodlust, he simply assumes she's suffering from a migraine. Lately, Juliet has developed a crush on Calliope, the new transfer student. She's tried everything to strike up a conversation, but nothing seems to work. Then, as fate would have it, Juliet literally bumps into Calliope at school one day, scattering her pills all over the floor. Encouraged by Ben, she finally musters the courage to talk to her. When she hears about a party that night, she seizes the opportunity and invites Calliope to come along. Calliope agrees. As they part ways, Juliet even sweetly brushes a bee off Calliope's shoulder. But what Juliet doesn't know is that Calliope isn't just any ordinary girl. She comes from a long line of vampire hunters. Her family recently moved to Savannah with one goal: to wipe out the local monsters. Not long after arriving, Calliope joined her 2 older brothers, Theo and Apollo, on a mission to a nearby cemetery. Like Juliet, Calliope has yet to make her first kill, while her brothers are already seasoned hunters who've been battling monsters for years. On this mission, Calliope's job was limited to scouting, locating targets while her brothers did the fighting. At first, everything went smoothly. The boys quickly took down a roaming ghoul, but when a vampire appeared, things got messy. Theo dropped his earpiece and missed Calliope's warning. Left with no choice, Calliope jumped into the fray. But during the fight, she lost focus and nearly got herself killed. Thankfully, her brothers arrived just in time to save her. Later that night at dinner, her brothers excitedly recounted the mission, but Calliope couldn't share their enthusiasm. Once again, she'd failed to get her first kill. Even her father, calling in from the field, reminded her that it was time she proved herself. And as a skilled hunter, Calliope had already sensed that something was off about Juliet. After their encounter earlier, she'd picked up one of Juliet's spilled pills, only to discover it was filled with blood. Before the party, the 2 girls crossed paths again in English class. Juliet could barely focus. Every move Calliope made seemed to captivate her. Her thoughts were consumed with wild, romantic fantasies. After class, Juliet tried to talk to her again, but Calliope quickly walked away. What Juliet didn't see was Calliope quietly slipping a silver bracelet into her locker, an act that caused Juliet to burn upon contact. Wincing in pain, she bared her vampire fangs, confirming Calliope's suspicions. Now that her target was clear, Calliope made up her mind. She would take Juliet down at the party that night. Unaware of the danger looming over her, Juliet was still daydreaming about what might happen next between her and Calliope. But her parents once again stood in her way, urging her to finally make her first kill. They warned her that suppressing her nature wouldn't solve the problem. In fact, it could backfire catastrophically. If her bloodlust exploded out of control, she'd not only lose herself, but also risk attracting vampire hunters, putting their whole family in jeopardy. Compared to her strict parents, her sister was far more understanding. Eleanor helped Juliet with her makeup and tried to calm her nerves before sharing the story of her own first kill, reminding her not to be too soft-hearted. Still anxious, Juliet headed to the party with a storm of emotions brewing inside her. With Ben, her flirty best friend, playing wingman, everything fell into place. Juliet and Calliope ended up sneaking into a storage room where they shared a passionate kiss. But in the heat of the moment, Juliet lost control of her instincts and sank her unbrushed teeth into Calliope's chicken neck. Prepared for this exact scenario, Calliope instantly drew her weapon and stabbed Juliet. But to her surprise, Juliet didn't burst into ash like the other vampires they'd killed before. Instead, she collapsed unconscious. The fact that Juliet didn't die only made Calliope more nervous. She fled the party in a panic, but her suspicious behavior quickly drew the attention of the police officers. It took everything she had to slip away unnoticed. Meanwhile, things at the party went from bad to worse. The power suddenly went out, and Ben stumbled upon a horrifying scene. A female classmate lying dead like a piece of shit on the floor, while a mysterious woman with an eerie smile slipped away into the darkness. At the same time, back at Calliope's house, her family was under attack. A shambling creature had somehow bypassed their protective wards and invaded their home. The three of them sprang into action, grabbing weapons and fighting back, but the creature proved surprisingly strong, taking them down one by one. In the chaos, they realized the monster was searching for a summoning artifact, an item Apollo had secretly brought home from their cemetery mission. When their mom heard this, she was furious. She stormed in, beheaded the creature on the spot, and immediately began lecturing Apollo about the dangers of bringing unknown magical objects into the house. It turned out the artifact had acted as a beacon, allowing the creature to teleport straight into their home. As if that weren't bad enough, Theo was also upset because the intruder had damaged a photo of their mother, sparking a heated argument between the brothers. Just then, Calliope burst through the door with some unexpected news. She'd finally made her first kill. But since Juliet hadn't turned to ash, their mother refused to acknowledge it as a real kill. That night, feeling defeated and insecure, Calliope had another dream replaying her past failure. In it, the monster had disguised itself as her mom, luring her into lowering her guard. By the time it revealed its true form, it was almost too late. Luckily, her real mom had shown up just in time. Back at the party, Juliet finally regained consciousness. Not only did she survive the stabbing, but she was strong enough to pull Calliope's weapon out of her own body. The place was already empty, so she quietly slipped away, completely unaware that she'd left her phone behind. When Juliet got home, her mom spotted the blood on her lips and, mistakenly believing Juliet had made her first kill, immediately gathered the family to celebrate the historic moment. Juliet, unsure how to explain the truth, went along with the assumption. Overjoyed, her mother decided it was time to host an official coming-of-age ceremony, an event that would attract monsters from far and wide. Juliet faked exhaustion to avoid further questioning and retreated to a room where she quickly hid the weapon. Thankfully, the wound wasn't too serious. The next day, Juliet met up with Ben and learned someone had died at the party. A memorial vigil was scheduled for that night. Meanwhile, Calliope's mother insisted she reenact her first kill. Embarrassed, Calliope glossed over the intimate details and mimicked a vague, close contact scene. Fortunately, her mom only cared about the killing technique, and once she was satisfied, she sent Calliope off to school. As fate would have it, Juliet and Calliope crossed paths again at school. Elsewhere, Eleanor paid a visit to the coroner to get information. The coroner revealed that the girl who died at the party was missing her liver, something he hadn't seen since a case many years ago. Alarmed, Eleanor used her psychic powers to wipe the coroner's memory of both the missing organ and her visit, and she made off with the autopsy report. Later, the police returned Juliet's phone, found at the scene. Her father, however, grew deeply concerned, not just about the phone, but about Juliet's future. She had an older brother who'd been kicked out of the family for going rogue, and he feared Juliet might follow the same destructive path. When Eleanor reported back about the autopsy, her father grew even more distressed. Her powers weren't inherited. They were unique to her, and he still didn't understand where they came from. Worried about the consequences, he begged her not to use them recklessly, but his words fell on deaf ears. That very night, Eleanor seduced a lonely man and drank deeply from him before wiping his memory of the encounter. Meanwhile, Theo and Apollo met with the Vampire Hunters Guild to report the incident. The guild's harsh criticism rubbed Apollo the wrong way. Seeking comfort in a bottle, he ended up running into Eleanor by chance. She wasn't even hungry, but decided to flirt some hormones out of him anyway. Back at home, Juliet's father sat her down and reminded her that if she ever had to kill again, she needed to stay in control. Juliet, though guilt-ridden and unsure what to say, could only nod and agree. Before long, Juliet arrived at the vigil with Ben, just as Calliope showed up with her mother. Things took a turn for the worse when Juliet, overwhelmed with guilt and emotion, began to cry tears of blood. Panicked and desperate not to draw attention, she fled the scene. Calliope noticed and quickly followed after her. When Calliope caught up, she pressed Juliet about what had happened the previous night. Juliet, flustered, could only say she had acted on instinct. But Calliope wasn't letting her off the hook so easily. Their chase led them past warning signs and deep into a restricted area, eventually ending up on the rooftop of the school. At that point, both girls knew there was no turning back. Calliope immediately launched into a fight. Juliet, though untrained, fought back surprisingly well, her instincts as a vampire kicking in. The battle was intense, but during the scuffle, Calliope accidentally came into contact with Juliet's blood and immediately collapsed. It proves that Juliet's blood had a paralytic effect. Seeing Calliope incapacitated, Juliet didn't take the chance to finish her off. Instead, she slipped away, choosing flight over fight. The next day, both girls were summoned to the principal's office. Faced with the teacher's pointed questions, Juliet, who was terrible at lying, stammered that she just needed some air and had gone to the rooftop to clear her head. Calliope jumped in, claiming she had followed Juliet out of concern. Calliope knew the excuse didn't hold much water, but she went along with it anyway to avoid further trouble. Of course, with something like this, the school also called in the parents. Calliope's sharp-eyed mother quickly caught on. The moment she heard Juliet's clumsy lie, she realized the truth. Juliet was the vampire Calliope had been sent to kill just days earlier. But instead of blowing the cover, she played along with Juliet's mom and agreed to let the girls return to class. Once outside the office, Calliope couldn't help but comment that she really can't lie to save her life. Still, she admitted that, despite everything, Juliet's earlier kindness had made her feel a bit more at home in a school where she was still the new kid. Juliet then asked if Calliope would still have stabbed her if she hadn't bitten Calliope. Calliope quickly answered yes, but Juliet, picking up on Calliope's quickened heartbeat, knew she was lying. Whether they liked it or not, the two were clearly entangled now, in more ways than one. Meanwhile, in an effort to smooth things over, Juliet's mom invited the Calliope family over for dinner. Calliope's mom agreed without hesitation. By now, she was almost certain of the Juliet family's true nature. Later that evening, Juliet returned home to find her older sister already waiting for her. She'd discovered Calliope's weapon and brought out the autopsy report as well, demanding the truth. Juliet tried her best to bluff her way through, though clearly shaken. Things were even more chaotic over at Calliope's house. An old friend had shown up with her parents, and even Calliope's long-absent father had returned, a sign that serious matters were at hand. Calliope's mom explained to him that Juliet wasn't a turned vampire. She was a pureblood, a direct descendant from a vampire bloodline stretching back thousands of years. That made her far harder to kill than the average night dweller, and with tensions rising, a major showdown seemed inevitable. Following Juliet and Calliope's first major clash, Calliope's mother has fully realized the monstrous nature of Juliet's family and is preparing for war. But before any action is taken, Calliope has a strange dream. In the dream, she and Juliet are walking together through Eden, a lush paradise of creation. Overwhelmed by emotion, the two can no longer suppress their hormone feelings for each other. Just as things start to heat up, a snake slithers onto Juliet's shoulder, startling Calliope. As she hesitates with a silver sword in hand, the serpent suddenly opens its jaws and lunges at her, jolting Calliope awake in terror. Meanwhile, Theo and Apollo have already started sparring. To everyone's surprise, Apollo wins easily and starts mocking his older brother. Their father quickly steps in, warning Apollo to stay humble. Arrogance could bring trouble to the family. As a punishment, he demotes Apollo to lookout duty for tonight's hunt. With the family drama behind them, Calliope begins training with her friend. Her flawless performance earns praise from both parents, and Calliope's mom and dad start imagining a bright future for their daughter. Still, they disagree over whether Calliope is ready to join tonight's mission. After all, vampire descendants are incredibly powerful, and Calliope lacks real combat experience. According to the Guild's ancient records, only one vampire heir has ever been slain, and that was over 400 years ago. Modern-day vampire hunters can only rely on outdated techniques and silver weapons passed down through generations in hopes of replicating that victory. The family is hyped for the upcoming hunt, ready for action, but Calliope can't stop thinking about Juliet becoming a target. Her friend notices her unease and presses for answers. Calliope reluctantly admits that maybe not all vampires are bloodthirsty killers, and that the way hunters slaughter monsters isn't so different from what the monsters do. The shocking confession leaves her friend completely stunned. Across town, Juliet is preparing for her coming-of-age ceremony. But without having completed her first kill, she's still suffering from unbearable bloodlust. To make things worse, her supply of suppressant pills has mysteriously disappeared. She quickly realizes this has to be her sister's doing. After their previous conversation, Eleanor figured out that Juliet hadn't made her first kill. To push her over the edge, she left Juliet just enough pills to dull the symptoms, but not enough to last. The goal is to force Juliet to act, but even then, Juliet resists. She's determined to avoid the ritual entirely, just like her older brother once did. Eleanor, furious, insists she fulfill her duty. Before anything else, though, Juliet needs to pick a dress for the ceremony. Yet despite the occasion, Juliet is far from excited. The guest list is filled with vampires from all over the world, not a single human friend in sight. Just then, her grandmother arrives from halfway across the country. Grandma immediately launches into the family's legacy. Vampires are a matriarchal society, and Juliet's lineage is the strongest of them all. Her bloodline has long been tasked with protecting and nourishing the Mother Serpent Queen, the origin of all vampire heirs. But before the story is finished, a car horn blares outside. Juliet instantly knows it's Ben, here to pick her up. As soon as Ben saw Juliet in her lavish ceremonial gown, along with the endless stream of fresh flowers being delivered to her house, he immediately realized that her family was hosting a grand event that night. But when he noticed he hadn't received an invitation, despite being Juliet's close friend, he couldn't help but feel a little hurt. Still, Ben wasn't just there to socialize. He was convinced that the classmate who died at the party had been murdered, and he wanted Juliet to help him investigate. But Juliet, overwhelmed with preparations, brushed him off without much thought. Frustrated, Ben stormed off, while Juliet returned to her studies on vampire history. According to tradition, she would receive the binding bite from the Mother Serpent Queen during the coming-of-age ceremony. Eleanor, however, warned her that without completing her first kill, the Mother Serpent Queen would reject her, and the entire family would be disgraced. To avoid that humiliation, Eleanor secretly lured over the actress playing Eve in the ceremony, hoping to trick Juliet into making her first kill before the ritual. She reminded Juliet that thanks to their prestigious bloodline, members of their family could walk in sunlight and even consume human food without falling ill. If Juliet refused to act, she risked throwing away the honor of her heritage. But even with all that pressure, Juliet still refused to kill an innocent. With no other option, her sister backed down, for now. That same evening, the vampire hunters were locked and loaded, ready to strike. But just before the operation began, the friend's father pulled Calliope's dad aside with troubling news. Calliope wouldn't be joining the mission. As it turned out, the friend had told her dad what Calliope had said earlier, that she wasn't sure vampires were truly evil and that hunters might not be so different from the monsters they hunted. Worse, the friend's mom had discovered the bite mark on Calliope. She quickly pointed out that vampire heirs don't leave visible wounds. Instead, their bites cause maddening itchiness and can even alter a person's thoughts. Calliope had clearly violated several hunter codes, and so she was forced to stay behind. The guild dispatched an henchman to keep watch over her, while the rest of the hunters set off, heading straight for Juliet's family estate. Meanwhile, vampire heirs from around the world were gathering at Juliet's home, eager to witness Juliet's coming-of-age ceremony. But the star of the night was far from ready. Eleanor had to steal blood to keep her from succumbing to bloodlust. Still, she wasn't giving up on the first kill plan just yet. Juliet was sent downstairs to stall for time, but just when things couldn't get more chaotic, her long-absent older brother made a surprise appearance. Juliet's mother, worried about airing the family's dirty laundry in public, urged him to leave, but he shamelessly insisted on staying. As if that wasn't enough, she was also stressed about Juliet herself. She could already tell Juliet hadn't made her first kill, but then again, she couldn't be too harsh. In her youth, Juliet's mom had been rebellious too. She was once betrothed to the heir of another powerful vampire clan, but at the last minute she ran off with the man she truly loved, Juliet's dad, who at the time was still human. That scandal brought shame upon their entire family. As a result, even though she was the rightful successor to Juliet's grandmother, her sisters had cut ties with her. Now, Juliet's mom was choosing to let her daughter make her own path, whatever it might be. At that moment, Juliet's grandmother was already addressing the gathered crowd, recounting the origin of vampires. At the dawn of creation, Eve and Lilith were playing in the Garden of Eden when they encountered a serpent. Eve, afraid, pleaded with the snake not to bite her. Lilith, however, accepted it willingly and became the first vampire. All vampire heirs descended from her, and so the coming-of-age ceremony symbolizes this legacy, with each new heir receiving the binding bite from the Mother Serpent Queen, but only after their first kill. After the ceremony, the vampire heirs were expected to hunt down the actress playing Eve. But Juliet wasn't at the ceremony site. She had been called away by her sister. Earlier, the henchmen sent by the guild had tried to drag Calliope back by force. Luckily, Calliope acted fast, knocked him out, and made her escape, only to run straight into Eleanor. Eleanor tied Calliope up on the spot, planning to have Juliet complete her first kill right there, and then to avoid bringing shame to the family. This time, she wasn't playing nice. She was determined to force Juliet's hand. Just when things were about to go too far, Juliet's brother arrived and got into a physical fight with their sister. But while Juliet's family was tearing itself apart, Calliope's family arrived. After placing down a device that emitted a powerful sonic pulse, they officially launched their hunt. Caught completely off guard, the vampire heirs scattered in panic as the vampire hunters began their slaughter. Calliope's parents led the charge and personally took down Juliet's mom and dad. But what happened next shocked even them. Juliet's mother didn't die. In fact, she got back up as if nothing had happened. The other heirs, though wounded, quickly recovered and were soon fighting fit. Realizing something was wrong, the hunters retreated. Amid the chaos, Calliope was unfortunately captured by the henchmen who had come to again, while the friend's parents ran into Juliet and her siblings. They told Juliet to run, and as she fled, she saw Calliope being dragged away. Then the two girls quickly teamed up, knocking the henchman out cold. They thought he was dead and stuffed his body in the trunk of a car. Both sides suffered heavy losses. The friend's parents were killed. Calliope's family captured Juliet's brother, and Juliet's dad, who had been turned into a vampire by her mother, couldn't regenerate like a pure-blood heir. With the situation spiraling, Juliet's mom turned to the family matriarch, begging her to help. But the grandmother didn't care about Juliet's dad and said her priority was getting the surviving heirs to safety. As their father's condition worsened and death loomed, Eleanor made a bold move. She approached their grandmother with an offer. If the matriarch agreed to save her dad, she would marry into the same elite family that her mother had once fled from. That offer sparked immediate interest. The grandmother wasted no time. She summoned the Serpent Queen and, with a venomous bite, transformed the dying father into a pure-blood vampire. Meanwhile, Calliope's family had no idea where Calliope was. They began torturing Juliet's brother, trying to force him to reveal her location. During the interrogation, they discovered he had been romantically involved with a witch. Still, he genuinely didn't know where Calliope was. But that didn't stop Calliope's mother, who was desperate to find her daughter. She called Juliet's mom directly and demanded to know Calliope's whereabouts. Caught off guard and equally confused, Juliet's mom proposed a meeting at a neutral location. At that moment, Juliet and Calliope were with Ben. The three of them had planned to deal with the unconscious henchman in the trunk, but to their shock, he had already escaped and tried to attack Ben. In a moment of instinct and rage, Juliet unleashed her true power. She overpowered the henchman and drained him completely, finally making her first kill. Ben and Calliope stood frozen in horror, speechless as they processed what they'd just witnessed. Ben especially was stunned. He had only just learned the truth about Juliet and her vampire family. Luckily, their years of friendship ran deep. After Juliet gave a heartfelt explanation, Ben reluctantly accepted the truth. The trio buried the body together, but their night took another unexpected turn when they ran into Ben's crush, who was there with his girlfriend, much to Ben's shock. To avoid suspicion, the three of them claimed they were holding a vigil for their deceased classmate. Unexpectedly, the girlfriend suggested having a memorial service right then and there. They had no choice but to play along. Thankfully, the event didn't involve any more danger. Calliope took the chance to pull Juliet aside for a walk. After everything that had happened that night, their guard was down. They wandered until they reached an apple tree, just like in Calliope's dream. And after everything they'd been through together, neither of them wanted to hide their feelings any longer. Under the tree, their connection finally blossomed into something like a smelly hormone yoga session. Sometime later, Juliet's dad arrived, ready to bring Juliet and Calliope to meet with Calliope's family. To reassure Calliope's mom, he even took a photo of the two girls as proof. Meanwhile, Calliope's family had brought Juliet's brother to the agreed meeting spot, waiting for the exchange. But things quickly took a turn. Juliet noticed something was off. Her dad never actually brought Calliope back to her family, and his eyes looked strange, almost unnatural. Before she could react, a witch suddenly appeared, blocking the road using her witch body. She released glowing red ribbons that wrapped through the air like a trap. Sensing danger, the three fled the car and took off running fast like riding Tesla bikes. It was clear now, this witch was the one romantically involved with Juliet's brother. As the red ribbons closed in, Juliet's brother understood what was happening. Without hesitation, he leapt into the air and vanished without a trace. Juliet and Calliope ignored Juliet's dad's desperate shouts and ran hand in hand toward the unknown. Now, it's become clear that Juliet's brother, cast out by the family, has returned with revenge in mind. According to him, it was Eleanor Eleanor, who repeatedly stirred their parents against him. Like their grandmother, Eleanor was obsessed with power and the family's reputation, making a future clash between them inevitable. Previously, the vampire hunters had ambushed the vampire stronghold but were forced to retreat in chaos. Amid the confusion, Juliet and Calliope both turned against their families and ran away together. But it was the middle of the night, and two runaway students had nowhere to go, so they made their way to school, only to find the gates locked tight. Juliet smashed a window to break in. After a short rest, they headed for the theater and shared their first real date. They talked late into the night about family, friends, and their hopes for the future, promising never to hurt each other. By morning, their parents were in a full-blown panic, but the girls finally called home to say they were safe. To everyone's surprise, they also made their intentions clear. They weren't coming back. They wanted to spend a normal day at school. Left with no other choice, their parents reluctantly agreed, so the girls happily joined the school play rehearsals. Ben, however, was still shaken by everything that had happened the night before, and he didn't exactly support Juliet and Calliope's relationship. Juliet, in turn, reminded Ben that he was in even more trouble. After all, his not-so-secret crush was a closeted straight guy with a girlfriend. That hit Ben like a freight train. Furious, he stormed off to confront his crush. Unfortunately, Juliet was right. The boy refused to come out and only wanted to keep their thing under wraps. As the two argued, a figure dressed in white suddenly rushed out of the shadows. Ben's phone happened to snap a photo, and he immediately sent it to Juliet. Meanwhile, alarms blared across campus. Teachers instructed students to stay put, but Calliope, thanks to her vampire hunter background, instantly recognized the figure as a zombie. She and Juliet slipped away to investigate. Technically, the crush boy should have stayed in lockdown too, but afraid his secret with Ben might get out, he snuck out on his own, despite Ben's protests. At that moment, Calliope was explaining to Juliet how zombies move at terrifying speeds like Teslas and strike to kill. Unfortunately, the crush boy had already encountered one. He was killed on the spot, with his straight life ended mercilessly. By the time Juliet and Calliope arrived, it was far too late. Meanwhile, Eleanor was preparing to honor her promise to her grandmother, an arranged engagement with the Porter family. She herself didn't feel much pressure about it, but her dad was clearly against it. He didn't want his daughter sacrificing herself for the family. Eventually, he explained the gravity of the situation. The Porters had always been ambitious, eager to replace their family as the dominant power. After last night's ambush, their family's reputation was in tatters. A political marriage was the only way to defuse the growing threat. Even so, her dad refused to approve the engagement. Eleanor stepped in to ease the tension, saying she was willing to go through with it. Seeing her resolve, her father finally relented, saying she could call off the engagement at any time, and he would support her no matter what. However, he made it clear he wouldn't be attending the ceremony. The mom quickly picked up on the real reason. He didn't want to see her ex-fiancé. Still, he had a valid excuse. As a newly transformed vampire descendant, he was going through his first molting stage, not exactly the best time for social events. Soon, 3 generations of Juliet's family were working together to prepare for the engagement. Each took time to talk with members of the Porter clan. Tension crackled between the two family leaders. Juliet's mom took the opportunity to apologize to her former fiancé for having run off years ago, while Eleanor and her fiancé seemed to be hitting it off quite well. Then, Calliope's mom arrived. Desperate to bring her daughter home safely, she offered a truce. Juliet's mom readily agreed, no longer interested in conflict. Not long after, the two families sat down for official negotiations. They made no attempt to hide their true intentions behind the marriage and laid all their terms on the table, bargaining like a business deal. At one point, they even discussed how many children Eleanor would be expected to have. That was the final straw. Outraged at being treated like breeding stock, she flat out refused the engagement. The grandmother was furious and demanded that Eleanor fulfill her duty, but her father, fiercely protective, told the grandmother to leave their home. Enraged, she slapped him and tried to drag Eleanor downstairs by force. That's when the dad snapped. He bared his fangs and, in a fit of monstrous fury, devoured his own mother, tearing her apart piece by piece. By the time the mom arrived, there was nothing left. Strangely, she remained calm. With the grandmother gone, she stepped into the role as the new family matriarch. Her first order was to tell the Porters to pack their things and leave. Elsewhere, Calliope had tracked down the zombie thanks to her hunter instincts. Together with Juliet, the 2-on-1 fight quickly turned in their favor. Just as they were about to finish it off, the zombie suddenly spoke, claiming to be their dead classmate. Juliet, kind-hearted as ever, froze in hesitation, but Calliope, having already botched her first kill once, didn't falter this time. She beheaded the zombie on the spot, completing her first official slaying. Unfortunately, Calliope was injured in the fight and began to bleed. The scent triggered something primal in Juliet. Her hunger began to rise uncontrollably. Calliope managed to calm her down, and they started disposing of the body. But instincts are hard to suppress. The bloodlust became overwhelming. Juliet, clinging to the last shred of her reason, begged Calliope to leave. That's when Juliet's brother appeared. The truth finally came out. He and the witch had killed their classmate at the party, hoping Juliet would feed on the body to complete her transformation. But since Juliet had been absent, the witch had reanimated the corpse into a zombie instead. Now that Calliope had killed the zombie, Juliet's brother was furious. Juliet was worried for Calliope's safety and told her to go. Her brother didn't bother hiding his intentions anymore. He made her an offer. If she helped him take down their sister Eleanor, he'd find a way to turn her back into a human so she could live out a normal life with Calliope. Even someone as kind as Juliet was shaken by the tempting offer. The next day, the Crush Boy's body was found and the school was in panic. Rumors about monsters were spreading like wildfire. Juliet and Calliope, as witnesses, were brought in for questioning, accompanied by their parents. With both mothers running interference, the girls kept their answers vague and avoided giving anything away. The police left with nothing. But neither mother was happy about how close the girls had become. Determined to come up with a solution, they agreed to meet that afternoon in Juliet's father's office. At the same time, Juliet's dad, now a district attorney, was holding a press conference trying to downplay the monster rumors and restore public order. But a group of parents, led by Ben's mom, had formed a monster hunting coalition and were demanding his resignation. Under pressure, he was forced to abruptly end the press conference. Though he was seething with rage and tempted to devour Ben's mom, he chose diplomacy. To smooth things over, he sent Eleanor as a peace offering. Back home, Calliope's mom was determined to sever Calliope's relationship with Juliet once and for all. She believed that when a vampire bites someone, it creates a psychic bond between them, and in her eyes, that bond was what had lured Calliope into falling in love. Because of the sensitive nature of the situation, the family didn't dare contact the guild to perform the severance ritual. Instead, Theo had to step up. Years ago, after his biological mother was killed by a vampire, Theo had undergone training and gone through a severance himself for his own safety. With everyone in the family begging her to go through with it, Calliope finally gave in and agreed. While the preparations were underway, Calliope's parents took time to meet with Juliet's parents. Despite being on opposite sides, both families quickly reached a consensus. For the sake of their daughter's safety, they would work together to erase the school's security footage and ensure that the two girls would no longer have contact. That evening, the family held the severance ritual for Calliope. The process involved a blood transfusion, using Theo's antibodies to neutralize the vampire descendant's toxins in her system. But the ritual was physically painful for Calliope, and it triggered vivid hallucinations in Theo. He heard his mother's voice calling out to him and relived the trauma of her death. Neither of them slept well that night. Later that night, Calliope quietly climbed to Juliet's window, using her agility to sneak into the bedroom. After their usual sweet, intimate moments, Calliope finally told Juliet about the severance. But Juliet wasn't surprised. In fact, she calmly said that this had to be a dream, since she hadn't been exerting any influence on Calliope at all. This meant Calliope's feelings were entirely her own. Because both girls were involved in the Crush Boys case, the school had temporarily suspended them. Eleanor decided to take her out that night to experience the fun side of being a descendant, while Calliope helped Apollo infiltrate Ben's mom's hunter club. That night, Eleanor brought her to a bar for some wild partying. Fueled by alcohol and the thrill of freedom, the two let loose. But for vampires, partying doesn't end on the dance floor. Eleanor quickly seduced a stranger and lured him into a quiet alley. There, she used her memory-wiping ability and then sank her fangs into his juicy carotid artery. Watching her, Juliet couldn't hold back her instincts. The man had also taken illicit drugs, amplifying Juliet's pleasure and making the experience overwhelming. Freed from restraint, the sisters took turns feeding on him, bit by bit, draining him dry. By the time he was dead, Juliet was shaken. Eleanor, however, was unfazed. With a smile, she led Juliet to toss the body into the lake to feed the mermaids. She even kept the man's business card as a souvenir. Juliet, disgusted by the senseless killing, was traumatized and ended up seeking comfort from Ben. Both old friends now found themselves lost in pain. Back home, Eleanor was greeted by a small surprise from her mom. As per tradition, the family matriarch gives a gift to her chosen heir. But because Eleanor had broken off her engagement, and since their mom had told everyone the grandmother was simply on vacation, they couldn't hold a proper succession ceremony. Fortunately, that didn't damage the bond between mother and daughter. The next day, following orders from her dad, Eleanor paid a visit to Ben's mom. But when she arrived, Apollo was already there, undergoing special vampire hunter training. Mistaking her for a threat, he blocked her at the door. With no choice, she left. That night, Juliet snuck into Calliope's room for another secret rendezvous. But this time, it wasn't a dream. Just as they were getting comfortable, Calliope received a message from Theo and went downstairs. He'd been having recurring nightmares about the day his mom was bitten. Over time, he realized something strange. The bite marks in his memories kept fading away, and the attack had happened during the day. That meant the killer had to be a vampire descendant. Calliope was stunned, but did her best to comfort him. Later, she returned to bed, and she and Juliet shared another passionate but smelly night. Their bond deepened, but trouble wasn't far behind. During a memorial service for the Crush Boy, his girlfriend's dog made a gruesome discovery. It's the body of the henchman sent by the guild. Calliope successfully made her first kill, marking a grim milestone. After undergoing the Severance ritual, she finally realized that her feelings for Juliet were genuine, true love. Unfortunately, things took a dark turn when the henchman's body was suddenly discovered. In just a few days, the small town had been rocked by multiple murders connected to monsters, leaving everyone on edge. Because the body was found near the site of a memorial service, Calliope, Ben, and other students were called in for questioning. But despite the police grilling, no solid leads emerged. Word quickly spread that the henchman's body had been drained of blood, fueling parents' fears that a vampire was behind the killings, and the town erupted in panic. Sensing trouble, Calliope decided to take a big risk. She brought Juliet back to her house, hoping her parents could offer protection. Calliope's parents were in the middle of cleaning weapons when their daughter showed up with Juliet, an unexpected surprise that immediately put them on high alert. Although they couldn't kill Juliet outright, they treated her like a serious threat. Calliope shielded Juliet with her sexy body, desperately hoping her parents would help keep her safe. After a tense moment, Calliope's parents calmed down and asked what was going on. Calliope revealed that the henchman had tried to take her to the guild that night, but Juliet had saved her, and that Juliet was also involved in burying the body. This confession softened their stance, and they promised not to reveal any information about Juliet to the police. But things got worse when guild members showed up, suspecting that the killer was a vampire Calliope knew. They demanded to search the Calliope household. Under pressure, Calliope's dad reluctantly let them in. Luckily, sensing something was off, Calliope and Juliet slipped out early while Calliope's mom created a distraction. The guild didn't catch any vampires, but they did arrest Theo for breaking rules. It turned out Theo had secretly called in guild hackers to help him and Apollo hack into the guild library and research vampire families. They learned each vampire lineage has a unique mark, and Theo had identified the killer's mark. But the unexpected raid threw a wrench in their plans. Now Calliope's brothers had to find the killer on their own. Meanwhile, since Calliope couldn't return home safely, Juliet called her brother for backup. But the police had already set up monster checkpoints on the road and issued a shelter-in-place order. As Juliet and Calliope passed through, they were forced to undergo a silver test. Just as Juliet was about to slip up, Calliope floored the accelerator to try and bluff their way through. Juliet cracked some badly timed jokes to ease the tension, but the female officer wasn't fooled and insisted on driving them back to Juliet's house. Once they arrived, Juliet's dad, though clearly frustrated, had no choice but to let Calliope in. None of them expected that the officer, convinced she had found a vampire, was already calling for backup. Meanwhile, Juliet's brother showed up, worried that Juliet hadn't answered his calls. When he arrived at the house, their dad immediately demanded he leave, even threatening to use force. That's when Juliet's brother realized their dad had been turned into a ghoul by the grandmother. Unfazed, the dad shifted tactics. Instead of fighting, he dredged up painful family memories to unsettle his son, finally forcing him to back down. But just as things seemed to settle, Ben's mom and her group of vampire-hunting moms arrived at the front door, chanting demands to hand over the vampire. To everyone's shock, Ben's mom mistakenly identified Calliope as the vampire. Ben was speechless. Left with no choice, Ben climbed over the wall to find Juliet and Calliope and explain what was happening. Both girls were left completely baffled by the mix-up. To confirm the killer's family, Apollo took Theo to a bar that Eleanor often frequents. He figured that since Eleanor is a vampire descendant, she'd definitely know the marks of other vampire families. Plus, since there had been some chemistry between them before, Apollo decided to leave Theo waiting in the car and go inside to casually grill Eleanor. Things quickly got heated, so much so that they ended up passionately performing a smelly yoga session in the stinky bathroom. Meanwhile, Theo, stuck outside and growing increasingly anxious, finally stormed into the bar with weapons drawn, searching for Apollo. Just as Apollo was about to ask Eleanor about the killer's family, Theo showed up unexpectedly. Eleanor immediately thought it was an ambush and attacked both of them. Although two fists can't really stand against four hands, Eleanor's battle experience gave her an edge. She faked a feint, then suddenly twisted, causing Apollo to accidentally stab Theo. Stunned by injuring his own brother, Apollo froze. Seizing the moment, Eleanor used her powers to reset both of their memories. Meanwhile, Juliet's mom issued a strict eviction order to Calliope, but Calliope argued that turning herself in wouldn't calm people's suspicions. Instead, the hunter group would storm their house searching for her, and their plan to ambush Juliet's family would be exposed. Reluctantly, Juliet's mom backed down, but Calliope knew she still had to find a way out. To keep her visit to Juliet's house secret from her parents, Calliope called Theo for help, unaware that she was about to face a devastating blow. After hearing that Theo was in trouble, Calliope rushed to the bar with Juliet, only to find Theo unconscious. Memory loss-stricken Apollo had no clue how to explain the situation to Calliope. To make matters worse, Calliope's parents were out searching for her. Devastated, the siblings steeled themselves to go home, while Juliet volunteered to stay behind and handle the cleanup. After wiping away the blood, Juliet was about to head home, but suddenly spotted Eleanor's lipstick. A bad feeling hit her hard, so she quickly retraced her steps to investigate. Back at home, Calliope and Apollo were at a loss on how to break the news of Theo's death to their parents. But to their shock, Theo was sitting at the dinner table with their mom and dad, eating like nothing had happened and casually recounting how he had taken down a vampire that night. The siblings were stunned. Their relief was short-lived. Soon, Theo felt something was wrong with his body and retreated to his room. It was then he realized he'd turned into a vampire. The revelation shook him to his core, but he had been a highly trained elite hunter, and now he'd become the very monster everyone hunted. No one could accept that. Unfortunately, the family quickly discovered the truth. As seasoned hunters, they fully understood the dangers of vampires. Without hesitation, they tied Theo up. Now, the entire family faced the painful dilemma of what to do with him. Meanwhile, Juliet confronted her sister, demanding an explanation for what had happened that night. Eleanor showed no remorse. She claimed that Theo and Apollo had ambushed her first and that her actions were pure self-defense. But Juliet saw things differently: cold-blooded cruelty and needless killing. Pushed to her limit, Eleanor finally confessed she intended to kill Calliope's family. Those words lit a fire in Juliet's heart. Fueled by rage, she decided to join forces with her brother. Together, they stole the key to Eleanor's secret warehouse. Thanks to Juliet's brother's connections, the police quickly located the warehouse and found a trove of victims' business cards inside. With hard evidence in hand, a large police force swarmed Juliet's family estate. Even Juliet's dad, as the prosecutor, couldn't protect his daughter now. He urged her to stay silent until her lawyer arrived. Meanwhile, Eleanor soon realized that Juliet had betrayed her. At the police station, Eleanor got another surprise. Her defense lawyer turned out to be her brother. She wasn't stupid and immediately saw through the whole setup. She knew that timid Juliet alone could never have brought her down. The two didn't even try to hide their old grudges as they started hashing out the past. It turned out that back in the day, Eleanor had pushed her brother hard to become a proper vampire descendant. She goaded him with harsh words, which drove him to kill his beloved pet, and even innocent humans close to the family. Their parents, believing him to be violent and uncontrollable, had no choice but to kick him out. Years later, Eleanor showed no remorse. Her brother, realizing this, dropped his ace card. He reminded her that their family would never tolerate a guardian who tarnished their reputation, and that meant Eleanor was headed for the stake. That shut her smelly mouth up. She could only glare bitterly as he walked away. Meanwhile, the parents had no real intention of using harsh family discipline. The dad worried that Eleanor would go on a rampage and slaughter everyone at the station, while the mom believed that Eleanor wouldn't be reckless enough to risk her reputation so blatantly. What truly concerned her was how to explain the grandma's disappearance to the vampire descendants. Luckily, the Vampire Council only meets every 6 months, so they planned to relax for now. But as fate would have it, a courier delivering a message from the descendants arrived with bad news. The council demanded a reassessment of the grandma's guardian status, and that inspection was scheduled for just a couple of days away. Suddenly, exercise and relaxation were off the table as the parents scrambled to come up with a plan. At the same time, Calliope's dad had made up his mind to do what was necessary and kill Theo, now turned vampire. But the mom's love for their son wouldn't allow it. The two argued bitterly. She even smashed a glass in frustration, desperate to protect Theo. Theo himself was in torment, battling a savage thirst for blood. He almost attacked Apollo in desperation. Fortunately, a sliver of reason remained, but in the end, Theo broke free and bolted into the night. Apollo chased after him relentlessly and finally caught him. This time there was no choice but to fight with everything he had. Meanwhile, Juliet had arrived at Calliope's household. She explained that since Theo had just transformed, his bloodlust was uncontrollable. The only way to stabilize him was for him to feed on the person who turned him, Juliet herself. When Juliet had turned back earlier, Theo had reached out to her for help. Juliet had planned to drain him dry to end his suffering, but her good intentions backfired, turning Theo fully into a vampire. Even worse, Calliope couldn't accept this explanation and promptly gave Juliet the boot. Juliet tried to explain and make amends, but Calliope was so resolute she pointed a weapon at Juliet, vowing she'd find a way to kill all vampire descendants. That cut deep, and Juliet left without another word. In effect, they broke up, though Calliope's harsh words were mostly out of anger. Soon after, calmer now, Calliope headed back to Juliet's family home. Meanwhile, Theo was once again restrained. After the recent chaos, Apollo and his dad agreed the only solution was to kill Theo to prevent further danger. His mom softened a bit, asking only for some time alone to say goodbye. The dad agreed since it was a reasonable request. But when the dad came to act, he discovered his wife had already fled with Theo. Left with no choice, the man grabbed his weapons and prepared to deal with the mess. The mom had taken Theo to Juliet's brother's place. Right now, it was the only safe haven. Juliet's brother welcomed them and led Theo to the backyard. What they found there was shocking. A whole menagerie of monsters. It turned out Juliet's brother was planning to team up with a witch to use these creatures to take over the whole town. With that, the drama comes to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.